Sunflesh slugs.
Hey guys!
Hello, flesh slugs.
I covered the big three 80s toy lines in part 3 of the 80s Toy Museum virtual tour. And surprisingly, one of the most obscure lines got most of the attention. Inhumanoids.
Inhumanoids. Inhumanoids.
The evil that lies within.
It's one of my favorite lines from the 80s, and since I only got to cover it for a few minutes in the Toy Museum tour video, I decided to do an in-depth series for the Core 4 and the terrifying trio. I'll start with what brought life to many of our favorite toy lines of the 80s. The cartoon! With the success of G.I. Joe and Transformers, Hasbro decided to branch out with some new toy lines, and in 1986, Inhumanoids were released. As with G.I. Joe and Transformers, the accompanying animated series was produced by Sunbow Entertainment, but unlike those other shows, Inhumanoids wasn't initially released as a standalone cartoon. It was released in 6 or 7 minute shorts as part of the Super Sunday animated series beginning in October of '85, alongside other Sunbow shorts like Jem and Robotics. It was bad enough watching these classic Sunbow 5-parters for G.I. Joe or Transformers back in the day and having to wait a week for the next part. Can you imagine getting only 6 minutes a week? Despite the lack of material offered, Inhumanoids and Jem still gained enough of a following to earn their own independent series, and in September of '86, the Inhumanoids animated series began. The shorts that had appeared on Super Sunday were edited together into a 5-parter that introduced the series, titled The Evil That Lies Within. Although many animated series back then ran for a minimum of 65 episodes, the magic number to qualify for being sold into syndication, Inhumanoids only ran until December of that year, totaling in at 13 glorious, creepy, horrifying, and quirky episodes. Being a Sunbow show of the mid-80s, many of the cast and crew were the same as the other Hasbro Sunbow properties. You'll recognize the voice talents of Sunbow regulars, such as Michael Bell, who played Augur and Blackthorn on Inhumanoids. He was Duke and Major Blood on G.I. Joe, as well as Prowl and Sideswipe on Transformers. William Calloway, the voice of Liquidator, was Beachhead on G.I. Joe. Dick Guachier, the voice of Pyre, Crygen, and their combined form Magnacore, was Rodimus Prime on Transformers, and Serpentor on G.I. Joe. Neil Ross, the voice of EarthCore's Commander Herc, was Shipwreck and Dusty on G.I. Joe, and Springer on Transformers. Ed Gilbert, the voice of the maniacal Metlar, was G.I. Joe Commander General Hawk, as well as Thrust, Blitzwing, and Superion on Transformers. John Stevenson, the voice of Grannock, was General Flag on G.I. Joe, and Cup on Transformers. And Christopher Collins, aka Chris Latta, was the voice of Tendril, as well as Decompose, and that voice could only belong to the guy who did the voice for Cobra Commander on G.I. Joe and Starscream on Transformers. Inhumanoids shared the same writers as G.I. Joe and Transformers as well, being penned in part by Flint Dille, and the gentleman I had a great conversation with recently on the channel, Buzz Dixon.
So even though the show was popular, even though kids loved the toys just weren't selling, and as a result, the toy line got canceled. And it got canceled halfway through the series. And Hasbro just told us, hey, we're killing the toy line. Basically, as long as you guys don't do anything X-rated, go nuts. And we said, really? And they said, yeah, we don't care anymore. Just make the show entertaining enough that we can put commercials for our other toys on. We have no problem with that.
Well, that explains Mangler and some of the other freaky stuff.
we just went nuts at that point. I mean, I actually had one script that I wrote. I had the voice actors go, "Whoa, are you serious? You want us to say this? You want us to be teenagers trying to kill people?" And I said, "Yeah, why not? It's a fun show."
Before the concept of shared universe was all the rage, Sunbow employed a shared universe with their animated series. The legalities of it were a bit tricky, even if Hasbro did own all the properties. But Sunbow managed to drop a few Easter eggs throughout Inhumanoids that suggested it took place in the same universe as their other series. The construction workers in Inhumanoids looked exactly like Spike and Sparkplug from the first season of Transformers. Decompose shows up on a TV in an episode of Jem. Some helicopters that look a lot like G.I. Joe Tomahawks appeared in an episode of Inhumanoids. And Sunbow's biggest crossover character, the news reporter Hector Ramirez, caused EarthCore to need a new TV whenever he appeared on the show.
This is Hector Ramirez reminding you.
And this is Auger reminding you to shut up. Hey, that's the 4th TV this month.
Hector also appeared on Jem, G.I. Joe, and Transformers. Although the show was made by Sunbow, the look and tone of the show is actually quite different from other Sunbow shows. While the other series were bright and fun, Inhumanoids is dark. Even in broad daylight, stark shadows are added even in well-lit areas to give the show a much darker, sinister tone. Another major difference was the split-screen effect used for certain action sequences. This was awesome, and especially effective for when the show was aired as shorts on Super Sunday. With the reduced runtime, it provided a way of squeezing more action into the shorter runtimes, giving you simultaneous perspectives from different angles. Let's talk about the story. It centers around 4 government-funded geological science researchers named EarthCore. I know, they don't exactly sound like an elite, daring, highly trained special mission force, or robotic alien warriors from outer space. These guys weren't action heroes. They were scientists, which is why I always describe Inhumanoids as Ghostbusters meets Godzilla. The chemistry between the 4 EarthCore members is hilarious.
Herc Auger won't know if we cut a corner here or there on his funeral.
Care to lay odds on that?
It's just like you to ruin a perfectly good funeral.
Oh no, here we go again.
First, you've got Herman Armstrong, the leader, better known as Herc. He's the level-headed one.
Fun and games are over, men.
Then there's Edward Augeter, aka Auger, the hothead.
If, by some weird freak of nature, we should ever want your opinion, we'll take a crowbar and beat it out of you. Comprende, Effendi?
There's the nature lover, Jonathan Slattery, aka Liquidator.
So peaceful, so...
We're not on a sightseeing trip, you goofball! We were almost killed up there!
And the brains of the unit, Dr. Derek Bright, aka... Well, he didn't really have a nickname on the show. They just called him Bright. I guess you don't need a nickname when your real name suits you perfectly.
I suggest we head downward.
What a brilliant idea. Your name isn't Bright for nothing.
The story starts with the discovery of a giant creature encased in amber in Big Sur National Park in California, which is retrieved by EarthCore. Just because you find something big and weird doesn't mean it's a good thing. Some things are better left buried. Corrupt industrialist Blackthorn Shore discovers a second monster, Tendril, who releases Decompose from his amber prison. The 2 monsters wreak havoc on the city and escape. Liquidator goes back to where Decompose was discovered to try to find clues as to the creature's history, which is where he meets the Redwoods, a sentient race of trees similar to the Ents in Lord of the Rings, only smaller, quicker, and less patient. The Redwoods explain to Liquidator that they're part of an ancient race of beings known as the Mutors, which are basically smaller Inhumanoids, elemental creatures and sworn enemies of the evil Inhumanoids. They browbeat Liquidator over being stupid enough to release the Inhumanoids after all the hard work they put into capturing them, and Liquidator defends the human race with the same explanation that justified every short-sighted, dumbass decision mankind has ever made throughout history.
Hey look, we didn't know what we were doing.
Humans seldom do.
Tendril attacks the EarthCore base and is chased under the Earth's surface, where we're introduced to another race of Mutors, the Granites, a race of rock people. A real-world problem develops when EarthCore's budget gets cut by Senator Masterson, who is working with Blackthorn Shore to free the third of the Inhumanoids, their leader Metlar. Blackthorn's sister learns of her brother's twisted plot and decides to privately fund EarthCorps with new vehicles and equipment so that they can set out for the Earth's core to stop Blackthorn. Blackthorn develops a magnetic suit that he thinks will help him control Metlar and force him to do Blackthorn's bidding, but as usual with Inhumanoids, things don't go as planned. Metlar was held captive for centuries by Magnacore, another Mutor and master of magnetism, Metlar's greatest weakness. Metlar escapes both Magnacore and Blackthorn's magnetic restraints, and Sandra gets turned into a horrific zombie by Decompose in one of the most terrifying scenes of any cartoon of the 80s. Cartoons just didn't do stuff like this back then, especially ones based on Hasbro toys. And stuff like this was a large reason why moms across North America refused to let their little boys and girls watch or play with Inhumanoids. EarthCorps join up with the Granites and Redwoods and split up to counterattack the freed Inhumanoids, curing Sandra of her nightmarish predicament. The Inhumanoids escalate things by attacking a Soviet base and stealing nuclear missiles. Blackthorn seems sorry for his involvement and warns EarthCorps about Metlar's plan, but it turns out to be a trap. The missiles are rigged to destroy the Earth's core. Metlar's mad plan backfires when Decompose wonders how the hell he would survive the explosion, and so he agrees to help EarthCorps deactivate the missiles, showing that despite appearances, some horrific ancient monsters can actually be reasoned with. History repeats as Decompose is once again trapped in amber by the Redwoods, Tendril is recaptured by the Granites, and Metlar falls to Magnacore's magnetic personality once more. Blackthorn is arrested, EarthCorps get a new headquarters built on the government's dime, and all is well. Except for a Tendril sample that foreshadows further monster mayhem to come. 8 more episodes were produced and aired after the first 5-parter, and unlike other Sunbow series, were closely connected. Other cartoons like G.I. Joe and Transformers didn't generally flow from one episode to the next, because they were designed for syndication, and needed to be able to be aired out of order. Inhumanoids was more like a current Netflix series. Pretty tight continuity from one episode to the next, and a slowly unfolding story. Unfortunately, it didn't get to culminate in a perfect ending, as the final episode aired December 14th. During my chat with Buzz Dixon, I learned that because the Inhumanoids toy line wasn't as successful as Hasbro's other toy lines, the writers were given more free rein with the show after the initial 5-parter than they were given on the other Sunbow shows. And boy did they use it! The writers used this nothing-to-lose attitude for a failed toy line to their advantage, and came up with some truly unique ideas for the mid-80s, and I'd say even unique by today's standards for a show aimed at kids. The continuity showed more attention to detail and caring towards the overall story than most cartoons did. And then there's the horror. No show at the time employed such gruesome scenes. People being devoured alive, mutilated, monsters getting limbs torn off, and a more dry, sarcastic adult tone for the humor, as opposed to the slapstick of other kids' shows. 2 of the monsters in particular still gross me out to this day. Nightcrawler, who was the tortured, demonic, reanimated form of Dr. Herman Mangler, who met his untimely demise in a pool of acid, and Gargoyle, who has a clear belly so you can see his victims digest after he swallows them alive. The character is introduced to us by having him devour his newborn siblings. Yuck! Despite the poor toy sales and short run of the cartoon, the cream always rises to the top, and Inhumanoids has gained a cult following for its super cool toys and boldly unique cartoon series. While everyone else was blasting into space, Inhumanoids delved into the Earth's core to battle the horrors right below our feet. And maybe that was too close to home for moms who tried to assure their kids there was no monster under the bed. It may not have worked as a kid's toy line, but Inhumanoids is perfect as a PG-13 property. The lightheartedness of the 80s, coupled with an ample dose of 80s style fun horror. There's been very little Inhumanoids media over the past 30 years. Only the first 9 episodes were released on DVD in North America, put out by Rhino Entertainment on 2 different DVDs. The first DVD, Volume 1, contained the opening 5-parter, The Evil That Lies Within. The quality of the episodes on the first DVD isn't as good as some other Sunbow shows on DVD, and the intro sequence is missing some sound effects and comes off very flat. Here's the original aired version of the intro.
Frank, look! It's another attack!
There's a human!
Humanoids!
Who the hell is Frank? And here's the intro from the Rhino DVD release.
Humanoids!
I was able to pick up the first DVD but could never find the second one, which goes for way too much money on eBay these days. Metrodome released a 2-disc complete series DVD set in the UK, and that's it. Everything else is a bootleg DVD or on YouTube or Dailymotion, and it isn't very good quality. Hopefully it'll get a proper release by Shout Factory, who have done some great releases for other Sunbow shows like G.I. Joe, Transformers, and Jem. Marvel put out an Inhumanoids comic that ran in 1987 under their sublabel Star Comics, but it only lasted 4 issues. And it was just an adaptation of the cartoon's opening 5-parter, and they didn't even get to complete the story. Kevin Smith was rumored to be penning a new Inhumanoids comic at one point, and although he denied it, he did reveal he was a fan of the series by saying, "It was a killer series back in the day. Shame it didn't last longer. Had some really gruesome shit that I wouldn't mind tackling someday." The elements of Inhumanoids aren't necessarily new and unique, but the combination of the source material which inspired it is. It's like people who say Star Wars is a ripoff of Kurosawa's Hidden Fortress, or Flash Gordon. No, it's not. It's a unique blending of the 2 properties that no one had thought to put together before. I mean, do you look at pizza and say it's a ripoff of bread? Or a ripoff of lasagna or spaghetti because it has cheese and tomato sauce on it? I don't. Somebody took these 2 elements and put them together and made a delicious new dish that bears similarities to its ingredients, but it's a very satisfying menu item on its own. Inhumanoids borrows from Ghostbusters and Godzilla, but combines them in such a way that it never comes off as a rehash. It has uniqueness to it that many kids from the 80s will attest is unforgettable, and kids of today will instantly recognize as leaping out to the forefront amid the countless brainless, soulless, money-grabbing dreck that surrounds it. I personally think Inhumanoids, just like Decompose, Tendril, and Metlar, is far too cool to stay dormant forever. It's just a question of when and if Hasbro will decide to remain true to the tone of the original property, or if they'll radically change it in an attempt to appeal to the highest number of potential toy buyers. If they ever do decide to make an Inhumanoids movie, and they go with casting well-known actors instead of unknowns, here's my dream cast. For Herc Armstrong, I'd go with Chris Pratt. He's proven with the Guardians of the Galaxy movies that he can handle both action and comedy. He's willing to put the time in the gym to play a guy named Herc, and he's also got enough comedic chops to not only pull off the jokes himself, but set up jokes for the rest of the team. Augur is a Brahma bull in a china shop, so who better to play him than Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson? He's eloquent and articulate enough to pull off the scientist aspect, and powerful enough to destroy every TV in sight that happens to have Hector Ramirez on it. And there are a number of nerdy types that could fill the role of Dr. Derek Bright, but I'd love to see Jeff Goldblum take a crack at it. Goldblum is offbeat and quirky, which is a vital ingredient to Inhumanoids. And speaking of offbeat and quirky, Zach Galifianakis as Liquidator. He's got a cool name, a cool suit, and a cool beard, but Liquidator is not a cool guy. But he's not an over-the-top worrywart either. He's kind of reserved, which I think Zach would be perfect for. I know him best for that stoic look that he can hold for quite some time, and that to me says Liquidator. Plus it would be hilarious seeing Zach in one of the big, powerful-looking Earth Core suits. I can imagine the other three pulling off their helmets and looking heroic while Zack tries to pull his off, but his beard gets caught in the circuitry, and assuring his teammates, I'm fine. I'll just leave mine on. The air's thin here. I don't want to take it off. Until we get a live-action Inhumanoids movie, I'd recommend watching Cloverfield. The whole time I was watching that movie, I was thinking, that's an Inhumanoid. This movie is Inhumanoids. So that's my Inhumanoids cartoon series review. Stay tuned for reviews of the Inhumanoids toys, Earth Core, the Mutors, the vehicles, and the Inhumanoid monsters themselves. Share if you like the video, leave a monstrous memory below, and to join the tribe, hit subscribe.
Nerdmastay.
Earth Core, suit up!